session 2 of the International Conference on Phonetic Research and Applications, Phonetics 2025, Hong Kong. So my name is Bartolome. I will be chairing this session, and we have an exciting program today. So starting with a keynote lecture, followed by several oral presentations.
Please join me in welcoming Professor Yu Su, keynote speaker at Phonetics 2025 Hong Kong, a leading figure in speech sciences. Professor Su is renowned for his groundbreaking research on how human produces and perceives speech, especially the interplay of prosody, tone, and intonation across languages. Currently based at University College London, his work bridges theoretical linguistics and real-world applications. From speech technology to cognitive psychology. His keynote, How Does Human Language Become Digital? Professor Su explores how phonetics, not syntax, digitizes language through articulatory encoding and perceptual decoding.
Thank you for all the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my research. I waste no time by starting sharing my screen. So as you may notice that there is a slight change in my title by adding evidence from computational simulations, because all the things that I will present today is from computational simulations. So I'll start with a video. There's recent discovery that chimpanzees have sophisticated gestural communication systems. And this is one example of how it looks like. And the two chimps are trying to communicate with each other by one of them asking the other to give him a scratch.
Rose at Raffia and Ramula. Rose is in a different tree. Scratching. Arm raising and shaking.
As you can see, it took 38 seconds for the chimp to get the simple message across. Give me a scratch. In 38 seconds, modern Homo sapiens, that is us, can easily say 120 words. For example, reading out your 120-word abstract for this conference. So what makes human language so efficient? According to Chomsky, language is, at its core, a system that is both digital and infinite, which gives it the property of discrete infinity. Indeed, this is a consensus now. Language is efficient because it is digital and infinite. But the further question is, how does language become digital? According to Chomsky in the same paper, each language provides an unbounded array of hierarchically structured expressions that receive interpretation at two interfaces: sensory-motor for externalization and conceptual intentional for mental processes. So in other words, discretization occurs in the brain, according to Chomsky, to allow words to become combined into infinite number of hierarchically structured expressions. And it is after that that it's also externalized into sensory-motor domain, that is phonetics and phonology. And of course, it also has the interface with mental processing, which we are not concerned today. What I would like to propose is two tests to see whether this idea is valid. And the first one is that which linguistic level has the smallest number of units? And it doesn't take a lot of thinking for us to realize that phrases are almost infinite in numbers. Words, according to Oxford Dictionary, there are 600,000 English words. And in terms of syllables, for English, according to one study, there are 15,831 different syllables. Mandarin has much less, but still 1,300 syllables with tone. It is when it gets to the level of the segments, that you reach a much smaller number. So for English, there are 44 consonants and vowels. For Mandarin, there are 40 to 58 consonants and vowels, plus 4 tones. So this is kind of like the digitization of computers cannot start from languages like C, Python, etc. But there's also another test, that is, which linguistic level is not itself made of discrete units. Again, phrases consist of words which are already discrete, and words consisting of syllables which are also discrete. And syllables consist of segments which are also discrete. It is at the level of the segments that things become murky, because you can argue that it starts from continuous articulation and acoustics, which are not discrete, or it may consist of features or gestures, which according to many theories are already discrete. But at least the digitization of speech is unlikely to start from the level of syntax. So my argument is that the digitization occurs at the level of phonetics, where analog to digital conversion takes place. And for that to happen, you need to have two discretization processes. You have to discretize the acoustic space, which itself is infinite and rich, and also the articulation space, which is also infinite and rich. So how can we do that? For that purpose, we look back at lessons from digital computers. Here's what Alan Turing proposed before the actual development of digital computers. In fact, it's his theorization that led to the development of digital computers. According to Turing, digital computers as discrete state machines make changes from one quite definite state to another. However, strictly speaking, there are no such machines. Everything really moves continuously in the physical world. But there are many kinds of machines which can profitably be thought of as being discrete state machines. Here's the key. There must be intermediate positions, but for most purposes, we can forget about them. But to ignore the intermediate states for speech, which is an evolved rather than designed communication system, unlike the computer, two problems have to be solved. One is, how can continuous articulation be converted to discrete categories? And the second, how can continuous acoustic signals be converted back to discrete categories? I'll start with a simple case, that is the Morse code, which is no longer in use, but it's a very illustrative case. The Morse code uses dots and dashes and spaces to encode discrete information. So this sequencing can give you to encode AU. In speech, we already know that we have more dimensions. For example, you can use pitch for tones, and you can use spectrum for consonants and vowels. So starting with tone, we can see that you can have low tone followed by a high tone, and these are two discrete units, right? But in production, what you can generate from these discrete units are things like this. So somehow it goes back to continuous process. And this is because we cannot avoid that. So here's an example of the high tone produced by a number of speakers following different tones in the preceding syllable. What you can see is that although this is a single categorical unit, but its surface form can vary very differently depending on the ending of the previous tone. And this is because to cover the distance of 6 semitones, according to one of our studies, it will take 142 milliseconds to complete the journey. So there's no way we can avoid this for humans. But this leads to the difficulty for perception, because perception has to deal with this kind of variability. Here are examples of the 4 Mandarin tones produced by 2 male speakers, but in different tonal context, as well as some of them are produced in the first syllable of a diasyllabic unit, and some of them are produced in the second syllable of the diasyllabic unit. So in other words, I'm only showing some very limited contextual differences and speaker differences, but still you can already see how difficult things might be for perception. And indeed, variability is an unsolved problem for speech perception, according to some of the latest reviews. But the question I'm raising now is something that people rarely think about. That is, why do listeners need to uncover categorical properties below the level of the phonemic categories? For example, do they really need to discover features or gestures? Why can't perception directly process continuous acoustic signals, for example, F0 contours? And this is what we did to test this possibility. And we did a simulation study in Chen and others, 2022. And we used support vector machine and self-organizing map, 2 different models to simulate tone perception in Mandarin. And they are trained in our study to either directly process F0 contours or extract various tonal features. And here are some of the features, including, for example, discrete pitch levels. It can be 2 level or 5 levels, and some features which are more gradient. But we also tested another gestural feature, that is pitch targets. So here's what you can have for 5 level discrete tone height features. So this is something that many of us are familiar with, because the 4 Mandarin tones are standardly transcribed as 5-5, 2-3-5, 2-1, and 4-3. What this means is that to process the continuous F0 contours, you need to extract these discrete forms from the raw signal, and then use these to recognize the tones. And to extract the gestural, we try to extract the underlying pitch targets, which is already 1 step in advance compared to the suggestion by motor theory, because motor theory says that the gestures themselves are discrete. But the underlying target is less variable, because they represent the underlying forms according to our target approximation model. So in this model, the articulation of a tone starts from underlying forms that are relatively discrete, but in production, you have to start from an initial state, and then you have to approach the underlying target over time. And when you're done with one tone, you approach the other one. And because of, again, physical limit, you cannot make the sharp turn. You have to do this. And this ends up having a continuous F0 surface form. But we managed to extract these underlying targets using the target optimizer. But here are the results of the simulation. The first thing we discovered with some surprise is that all the models, because they are made trainable during the simulation itself, They all achieved high accuracy. All of them are above 90% accuracy of tone recognition. What this tells us is that variability itself is not a barrier when it is used as data. And second discovery is that training with full F0 contours led to the best recognition, which suggests that no part of the transition should be ignored, which is unlike what Alan Turing imagined, because we make use of all the transitional details to achieve the recognition of the categories. And third one is that extracted articulatory targets showed no advantage. They're good, but they can be only just as good as processing F0 contours directly. So that shows that because it's a complicated process itself, it's not necessary. So what this tells us is that perception does not need to know things about articulation, unlike a lot of theories have assumed. In fact, overall, there's no need to uncover any underlying forms, not even the semi-discrete articulatory targets, because the task of perception is only to identify the phonological categories. In the process, you don't need to discover or recognize the other underlying forms which are supposedly categorical. Now, this simplicity of perception actually allowed us to ask an even further question. That is, how do children learn articulatory encoding in the first place? Note that this is something that is critical for an evolved system, because over all the generations, each time you have to relearn the system afresh. So if perception does not require knowledge of articulation, what that suggests is that children can start from it. And that is indeed the case from real life data. So in real life, by now we know very clearly that children start to learn perception, language-specific phonological perception, by 6 months. And they don't start to speak their first words until 12 months old. What is also interesting is that, according to Kuhl, 2003, similar cases can be found in songbirds, which are also vocal learners. So meaning that they have to learn their songs during their young age. And their learning consists of 2 stages. In the early stage, they only need to listen to the songs. After that, they don't even need to listen to the songs, but they'll do vocal practices during which they learn to sing the songs themselves. So what this suggests is that the learned perception could guide articulation learning. And this is what we tested in another study. We did a project called Evoc Learn, during which we trained an articulatory synthesizer, the state-of-the-art articulatory synthesizer called Vocal Track Lab, to simulate a learner, vocal learner. And the model also implemented the synchronization model of the syllable, which I'll explain in a moment. And in the process, we tested different learning schemes. So this is what synchronization model of the syllable says. That is, for every syllable, the consonant, vowel, and tone are synchronized at their onset, in the sense that they all start their own target approximation toward their own relative targets at the same time. And at the turn of the syllable, they suddenly change to approach another set of targets. And in this model, the so-called co-articulation that we're so familiar with happens only within the syllable. There's no co-articulation between syllables. And we have now received empirical support for multiple studies that we have conducted in the last few years. And the modeling process also involved a recognizer. In this time, we just used state-of-the-art deep learning-based recognizer. So there's nothing surprising here, but it is something that is already widely used in speech technology. So here are the results of training the vocal tract lab. But the results that I'm presenting here are only from the perception-guided learning, because that gave us the best results. So here's the video.
Bad.
This is the recognizer, and it trains the model.
Bad.
And this is
Bad.
synthetic one based on perception-guided learning. And to learn that,
Bad.
you need to optimize all the artificial parameters.
Beat. Beat. Bed. Bed. Bid. Bid. That. That. Did. 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 Good. Good. Body. Body. Debbie. Debbie.
But. But. Why? Why? Bet. Bet. That. That. Cut. Cut. Body. Body. Daddy. Daddy.
Okay, so these are perception-guided learning, but we also have results from acoustic-guided learning. As you can see from these figures, the perception-guided learning gained much better results than acoustic-guided learning. But what is the most interesting from these figures is this one. That is when you plot the acoustic errors over the accuracy of listener perception, because these results are from the listener dictation. They have to write whatever words they have heard. There is no correlation between the acoustic error and the accuracy of perception. But for the recognition error generated by the learning process itself, you can see a negative correlation over accuracy of perception, which means that the less the recognition error, the better the human perception. So what do these results tell us? First, as children start to develop phonological perception, they can use it to guide their vocal learning, provided that they have also started to babble canonically, which happens at about 7 months. That is saying ba, 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 ma, 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 which indicates that they have mastered the basic principle of the syllable, a mechanism to synchronize the articulation of consonants, vowels, and tone. And then the study shows that guidance by perception is more effective than direct imitation. We have also replicated these results from another dimension, that is the recognition-guided vocal learning of tone and focus. So in Meng and others, we show that production of tone can be learned under guidance of tone recognition, just as well as by F0 fitting in pentatrainer. And in Ding and others, production of tone and focus can be simultaneously learned under guidance of tone focus recognition, just as well as by F0 fitting in pentatrainer. So this leads us to the general conclusion. How does language become digital? Digitization starts from articulatory target approximation, which converts discrete categories into discrete underlying shapes. But during articulation, it goes back to continuous signal as well. It is perception that completes the digitization process by identifying discrete categories from syllable-sized raw acoustic signals. And both processes are enabled by learning, which treats variability as data rather than barrier. Because vocal learning is trained by perception, they only need to agree on categorical identities. There is no need for strict matching of phonetic forms between production and perception, which is something that people have been trying to find out all the time. But in fact, there is no need for that. So going back to the beginning topic, we can see that words are composed of phonological units that are phonetically discretized. And language is digitized at the phonetic level, not at the syntactic level, according to Chomsky. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Chu. So we now have 2-3 minutes for questions. If you would like to ask something, please raise your hands or use the chat.
Hello, may I ask something? I raise my hand. I don't know if this system functions. Okay, thank you very much, Issue. It's always a pleasure to have you. Well, I must say for everybody, Issue is a good friend of our society, and he was in our very first workshop at the time in Glyfada in Athens, 97. So if I take the big picture, we can say that this combination, continuous and discrete, that's the magic of language in order to communicate fast and effectively.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we couldn't make it. I mean, this co-articulation, it is what it speeds up the process. Think, we couldn't communicate with discrete units.
Right.
Co-articulation and variability helps us. Which means if we go back, because we shouldn't throw everything away, all the old things. I mean, the phoneme allophones and all things, they were just forgotten, but they exist still today. We communicate, we say segments, phonemes, allophones. Okay, and in this sense, I would name the distinction, the old distinction, langue, parole, language and speech. Speech is continuous, language is discrete in order to communicate.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. But what we have done is to specify how exactly it is done. That is not a trivial question. Yeah.
You've done an excellent work, Issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
So, okay, we have time for one more question, 2 more questions. Okay, Marcena, Sundar was first. Sundar Huma.
Hello, my name is Sundar Huma and I'm from Pakistan. Mr. Yu, I have a question that you have identified and mentioned discrete units. My question is, if I'm audible, that don't we follow in phonetics and phonology the syntactic structures at the discrete unit level of phonemes? So why can't we relate it to the discrete unit of syntax in phonetics and phonology?
Sorry, could you repeat the last sentence again?
My question was that in phonetics and phonology, when we talk about the sounds, we are actually referring to the discrete units of sounds. And in a syntax level, we are referring to the discrete unit of grammar. Why can't we say that in phonetics and phonology, we are referring to the discrete units of syntax of sounds?
Okay, so I'll try to answer the question from what I can understand. Basically, Chomsky's idea, if you read a lot of his writings, is the notion that somehow over evolution, something happened in the brain that makes everything discrete. What I have discussed is that the fact that speech becomes discretized or digitized is that we have phonetics. Phonetics turns articulation into the basic digital units. And with the basic digital units, then you can compose larger units. So syntax is not the starting point. It's already the level of the equivalent of a C language, Python language is already high up there. But before that, a lot of digitization has to happen to form the foundation. And the things we do in phonetics is the foundation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Marcena, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, but first of all, I would like to thank you for your wonderful talk. This was very interesting. I have a question concerning one of, as I strongly assume, one of your claims. Namely, you said that there are no co-articulatory effects across syllables, but rather, if we have co-articulatory effects, they would happen within a syllable, right?
Yes.
So I wonder how universal this claim could be, because when I think about languages with very complex clusters, consonantal clusters like Georgian, Polish, and others, then it is very difficult to determine the boundary, right? So we don't know exactly where the syllable boundary is. It's very difficult to determine the beginning and the end of the syllable. Even if you ask, native speakers, if you run experiments, that's a big question sometimes. It's not always the case, but sometimes. So my question is how universal your claim is about this particular topic. I understand that if you take tone languages, it's much easier because this is the domain of the assignment. But what if you take other languages? That's my question.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. In fact, what you have pointed out is the key to the issue. So first, our claim is that this principle is absolutely universal. It's universal across all human languages. Second, the question you raised about the boundary, that's exactly the essence of the studies I listed. Because one of the first things to determine is where the syllable starts. So in general, to make a long story short, what we have determined is that the syllables, as we decided, determined through very careful studies, is at least 100 milliseconds earlier than our current understanding of a syllable onset. That is the onset of, for example, consonant closure or start of the frication of fricatives, and that's already too late. So the real syllable onset all starts at least 100 milliseconds before that, and probably 150 milliseconds before that too. Of course, this whole thing would require another whole presentation, but that's the short answer I can give you.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting the point, but then I'm thinking that, of course, this is the core of your claim. But then I'm thinking about, how this would align with phonology, with our understanding of the syllable. If it doesn't align with with the boundaries, or even more important, because your claim also refers to children and how they acquire the language. So if you ask children to clap their hands at the boundaries, right, they would use this, but it wouldn't align with your approach. This is where I don't know how to combine these two, right?
Okay.
So it is a kind of abstract syllable you are assuming, or is this the phonological
No. Our
concept?
claim is that syllable is not abstract at all. It's very concrete, very concrete. Okay, the one
Yes,
thing I
that if
forgot to
it's
mention to refer to your question is that our studies actually started from English, not from Mandarin. Mandarin is something that we did the last, only in the latest studies. So our determination of the syllable boundary and synchronization was from English. As
Okay,
for
but English
phonology,
is not a language that is very complex. So I was talking about Georgian, Polish, and other languages where it is even for researchers difficult to determine the boundaries. There is like you can have two consonants going to the first syllable or to the second. So how would you able to determine this?
Of course, as you know, all claims are theoretical, are hypothetical. So I encourage all researchers who are interested in this topic to test our proposal. I'm not claiming we're right, but we're proposing that this has to be the case, and this has to be tested. It's to be verified by studies.
Okay,
So
thank you.
okay.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, Chu. We unfortunately don't have time for questions now at the moment, but if you would like to discuss further, so please feel free to contact Professor directly by email.
Hello, everyone. My name is Al-Saqer, and I'm presenting this research with my co-author, Arwa and Trima, under the supervision of Dr. Yahya Aldholmi at King Saud University. Our study is about speech rate perceptions and speakers' identification. In simple terms, we explore how people hear and judge speech when it's directed at human versus devices. So let's begin with the focus of our study. This project has two goals. The first one is to see how fast the speech sounds when directed at a human compared to devices. The second one is to see how well people can identify the target of the speech. What makes this study different is that we combined both dimensions in the same experiment. This gives us a more complete picture and has direct value for voice-based systems like assistants, healthcare tools, and education platforms. So let me share the three studies that guide us. The first one is in 1922. It showed that when a speech is fast, more uniform, it feels efficient, but it can also sound less engaged. The second one, it's in 2023, founded that nature variation in human speech helps listeners recognize and connect more easier. The third one, which is in 2024, demonstrate that when people adopt their speech in conversation, it becomes clearer and easier to perceive. But what none of these studies did was put human and device direct speech side by side. That's the gap our study addressed. So now, with this focus in mind, let's move to our research question. We ask two key questions. The first one is, do listeners perceive device direct speech as fast than a human direct speech? The second one, are listeners more accurate in identifying a human direct speech compared to device direct speech? These questions guided our design and analysis. Our expectations were clear. The first hypothesis was if device direct speech would be rated as fast. The second hypothesis that human direct speech would be identified more accurately. So this comes from early work showing that device speech is often uniform, while human speech has more tone and rhythm. So this changes which listeners rely on. Our participants, the number of our participants is 78 native Arabic speakers. Their age around 19 to 22. We used a within subject design, meaning each participant listened to both human and device directed claps. The order was counterbalanced to avoid the bias. Each person evaluate 30 short claps, giving us a solid data set for combination. Now let me explain the task they completed. Participants did two tasks. The first one, rate the speech speed on a 7-point scale. The second one, the second task, identify whether the clap was a human or device directed. So the claps were controlled, the same speaker, same words, same length. The only difference was the style of delivered or the delivery. This setup ensure the difference come only from the context. With this in place, let's move to the results. So our first finding is about speech rate. So device direct speech was rated 4.09 on average. A human direct speech was rated 3.56. So the difference was statistically significant with a medium effect size. So if you look at the figure here, you can see that the pattern clearly. The box plot shows that rating for device direct speech are shifted higher, while human direct speech clusters lower. This visual makes it easy to see that listeners judged device speech as faster, even though the actual length of clips was the same. This result confirmed our first hypothesis. Now let's look at the identification accuracy. The first one, it's a human speech was identified correctly 83% of the time. Device speech was identified correctly 78% of the time. So the difference may look small, but it was statistically significant with moderate effect size. So here we have, if you look at the figure here, you can see the higher accuracy score for human speech compared to device speech. The chart makes it clear that people rely on the nature variability in human speech to recognize it more easier. These results support our second hypothesis. So these results gives us an interesting trade-off. The first one is device direct speech, effective, faster, and uniform. For the human direct speech, it's rich in variations, easy to identify, and more engaged. So we see a balance between speed on one hand and natureness on the other hand. This trade-off has important implications, which I will explain next. For technology, the lesson is clear. For machines, voices should not only focus on clarity and speed. They should also include intonations, rhythm, and small variations so the sound more human and reliable. This can improve applications in virtual assistants like healthcare and education, where users expect both efficiency and connections. Now, let me summarize the main conclusion. So, in conclusion, the device direct speech is perceived as faster. Human direct speech is identified more accurately. Nature variability, such as tone shifts and rhythm, is key for perception and engagement. This balance between speed and the human-like feature is important for both research and design. Let me look at future research directions. We see four promising areas for future research. The first one is the role of emotional tone in perceptions. Second one, cross-culture differences in listeners' response. Third one, it's interactive real-time conversation, not just the clips. Fourth one, it's adaptive system that can copy human like rhythm. These directions will bring us close to systems that feel natural and human. So now let me share the bigger reflection on why this matters. So the broader message is the voice system must balance efficiency with a human quality. It's not just enough to give information quickly. Systems should also feel natural and human-like, so people can connect with them. The future lies in systems that combine the speed with emotion, creating richer and more reliable interaction. Here we reach to the end. So before I close, I would like to thank those who support this work. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Rihi Aldholmi for his guidance, my co-author Arwa and Rima for their contributions, the College of Language Science at King Saud University, and of course our participants for their support. Thank you very much for your attention and of course listening. It has been a pleasure to share this research with you. I'll be happy to take your questions, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much for this insightful presentation. So I'm a friend, we are running out of time. If you have a quick question, okay, Forgado, quick question, please.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I would just thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. And it's not a question what I would to say, it's just a part of thinking and the reflection. I think it's really interesting and good work. But at the same time, I was happy about the results. So the people still can recognize device and human speech. So it's good. But actually, the future direction was to improve, so it will be harder to recognize. And I think it's really interesting, but also it can cause some ethical reflection, because it's also important to think about the consequences that it can cause whether one teenager did not recognize the device and human speech. And you know, now it's a topic, and it can cause also some disasters. So I think it's also important to think about the consequences of this work. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, thank you. I'm working on the effects of morpho-phonological consonant deletion on adjacent vowels in true Meru dialects in Africa.
Constanza, can you make it a little bit bigger? Just click on animationen. Okay. Because we can only see the whole PowerPoint version, but it might be better to see the full slide. Okay.
Yeah,
so as you prefer. So if you feel more comfortable in that way.
No, I just see my screen. I cannot see what you see, but
okay, it doesn't
I'm
matter. So,
on present mode.
Okay, it doesn't matter. So go on.
Okay. So Meru in Kenya, and is the languages that we are studying are around Mount Kenya and it's the richest agricultural belt in we see that there is sub-ethnic groups that spoke dialects that are multiple intelligible, and this is the most interest that we have. The population we have recorded is multilingual. They speak Swahili, English, and one or more local dialects, most of them at least 2 or 3. But the local dialect is used mostly in informal situations. This is the region where we are. I don't know if you can see. The red one is the central Meru, where the spoken language is spoken, and then we analyze the dialect in the south, not close by, and one in the north. Yeah, Imenti is the most dominant dialect and is close to a standard accent of Meru. It has the most developed literature and is used in schooling. Chuka is the southmost dialect of this continuum and has a status between the language and this dialect because it has also some literature and so on. And Tigania is almost exclusively used in oral forms or social media. We don't find anything written on this language. And our main aim of this research is we have this bilabial fricative deletion in Shuka. And because Bantu language tends to avoid hiatus formation, then is the question what happened with these two vowels in sequence. We have three predictions. If the vowels have the same quality, then they will merge, like in this case. And in this case, it doesn't matter if the vowels merge in the stem or with the vowel of the prefix. The second prediction is about if the first vowel is in the prefix, then we will have shortening of this vowel. And here are some examples that we can have an idea what happened with these vowels. But if the first vowel is in the stem, then we will have lengthening of these vowels. And this is exactly what I'm trying to show here with these examples. Good, now just a couple of words to our field trip. We did field trip, I did this field trip myself. I went to Nairobi in Kenya, and then we went the way up. These are the regions where we were not looking for cities, but very small places, mostly with just a couple of buildings where we're recording then the speakers. And we present single words on a screen written in English and Swahili, and then ask the participants to give the equivalent in the local dialect they spoke. We have two recording rooms separately. I was recording myself with a native speaker of the dialect, and a colleague of mine, an Imenti speaker, was recording in the other room. We had 89 words in total with 2 or 3 repetitions, but we are analyzing just a few of them today. In sum, we had 26 speakers of Chuka, 23 of Imenti, and 26 of Tiania. And here you see already our results on vowel duration. And we see that in merger, we indeed see that the vowels are really long. V1 and V2, these two vowels are really long. In the stem, we saw that just the vowel in verbs show lengthening and the other vowels didn't. They are similar to the vowels in the prefix that you can see in the middle. And we cannot see much evidence of vowel shortening. There is single words that did it, as Kobida and Kobinga, but the others didn't. Did some shortening on these Imenti and Tiania dialects.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm afraid that we cannot see the slides. We can only see the title slide.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's okay now. Are
you seeing it now? Because I came out of the present mode. So are you seeing it now?
We are not seeing your presenting mode. We are seeing the slide mode. We can see another slide showing some of the charts.
Because I was in presenting mode, and probably you, and as you said, I didn't realize that you were not seeing my slides.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
all right, that's fine. It's okay now. We can see the results overview.
Okay, so
slide.
at least the results. Great. I'm really sorry.
Okay, so thank you. Please continue.
Let me just so maybe this is important. I will just go back to the predictions just to show you some words how they look like. I'm really sorry for that. For example, here are the predictions from vowel merge. You have our control dialect is Gotava, where you have the vowel deletion, and then we are analyzing what happens in the other two dialects. In Imenti and Tihania, where you have like two vowels in a sequence. This is here we expect the vowel to merge. Here we expect the vowel in green and blue to shorten, and here we expect again the vowel in green and blue to lengthen. Okay, and now again to the results. These are my first results. Here we are seeing vowel V1, first vowel, and you see that indeed the vowel merge, or at least they are much longer in this condition of merger than the other one. And you see some lengthening as expected in the stem, but only for the verbs, and the other three words are nouns. So in nouns, it doesn't seem to happen. We are now analyzing more words. And here in prefix, this was the case where we expect the first vowel to become a glide and to shorten. And we can see some evidence here for Kobita and Kobinga, but not for the others. So yeah, we will analyze also more words, but let's see what follows. What I think it's interesting here is again the same conditions, but I'm computing the duration of V1 and V2. And we see that actually this very long vowel is actually as long as two vowels. So it could also be the case that the two vowels remain, or at least this very long vowel is as long as the other two vowels of the other conditions. Good. What happened? Here, these are the words of this middle panel. And what happened is that we couldn't find significant shortening on vowel duration, but we see very clearly that the vowel quality is changing according with the context. So it's very interesting, the first talk today in the morning, because here it seems that the second syllable had a huge influence of my V1. So V2 in the second syllable had a huge influence on quality of this V1. So yeah, my summary, we found very long vowels. For merger, we have no evidence for phonological shortening, and we find lengthening only for verbs, but not nouns, and the change on vowel quality where we don't find shortening. So thank you very much. And it's all. Then I hope I have some time for questions.
Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, Consensal. So let's move on to our next speaker, online presentation 4. It's called Nasal Consonants in Malaysian by Catherine and Michael.
Right, so I'll be talking about the nasal consonants in Malayalam. Just a background about the language. Malayalam is a part of the South Dravidian language belt, and it is among the 22 scheduled languages of India. These are the number of speakers of Malayalam, which is about 2.88% of the Indian population. Something of interest to us is that Malayalam is very rich in nasal consonants. And it is spoken predominantly in the state of Kerala, which is in India, and also parts of Lakshadweep. So just a little about nasals. I'm sure all of us know what this category of sounds are, but just as a quick reminder, nasals are produced by lowering the velum, allowing air to escape through the nasal cavity. And when the vocal tract is blocked, we produce what is called nasal murmur. There are some acoustic properties of nasals which are very interesting. Again, I'm sure all of us might be familiar with it. It has very low first nasal formant frequencies, higher losses, dampenings, and of course, the presence of antiformants. Usually, when acoustic properties of nasals are studied, we look at duration, formants, vowel transition, antiformants, fundamental frequency. For this study, I would concentrate on duration and nasal formants. A little about the background of Malayalam. So basically, as I said earlier, it comes from the Dravidian language family. And according to scholars, Proto-Dravidian had these nasals. This is written in IPA, so the bilabial dental, retroflex, and the palatal nasals. And interestingly, as you can see, the other Dravidian languages which are noted here is widely used among the speakers in India. And as you can see, from Old Tamil and Old Telugu, the nasals later on merged. So basically, Kannada, Tamil, and Telugu have 3 nasal consonants which is being used today, Whereas Malayalam, as I said, has 6 or arguably 7 nasals in its repertoire. This is the distribution, and I would like to highlight a few things over here. So if you look at the word positions, bilabial, dental, and palatal nasals are covered initially, and finally we have bilabial and alveolar. All of the action in Malayalam takes place in the medial position. So you can see them as nasal plosive clusters, and intervocalically is where all the action takes place. So they actually contrast only in this medial position as geminates intervocalically. I'll just play a few sounds. I hope it is audible. I'm not sure if that works. So that is kanni, which is a Malayalam band. And that is contrastive with kanni and kanyi and kammi, kanni, like that. We can also see that there is a geminate singleton contrast as well, which is also interesting. So you have kanni, which means chain link, and then you have kani, which is first vision. Another thing I would want to highlight is the interesting sort of distribution that we have within the dental and alveolar nasals. Now, the relationship is 2 parts. So you have it is an allophone where you find dental in word initial position, and elsewhere it is actually an alveolar, right? Except for when you have it as geminates. So as geminates, dental and alveolars are phonemic, which is interesting. And another interesting part is the palatovelar and the velar. So we have sounds like matanya, right? And you have kangi. So both of these are sort of in the velar part, but again, there is a palatalized element which does come. And again, you can argue here whether this should be considered as a phoneme or an allophone, and scholars also sort of have that debate currently. As I said, dental and alveolar nasals, they have partly phonemic and allophonic relation. And studies on this suggest that one cue to maintain the contrast is by secondary articulation. So where the dental is velarized and alveolar is palatalized. And similarly, the palatovelar nasal also has a lot of importance. But the thing to note is that this is not present in all the regional varieties in Kerala. So if you look at North, this phone is not even present. And also the environment is very restricted. So we sort of, are inclined to think that there is sort of an allophonic relation. So another interesting thing is about the distribution in the sense of the tokens. It's very limited, and they do not contrast at all the different places together, except for in that one environment that you can see when it's preceded by an A and followed by an E. Other than this context, you can actually see them group themselves into different minimal pairs. But across all the 6-way contrast, you can see it in only this environment. And that is what I would be concentrating on. So the broad question I address is, given all the 6 to 7 nasals, how do Malayali speakers actually have the contrast maintained? Because it is widely used by all the speakers. Malayali speakers. So the current study, as you can see, has 12 speakers, male and female, and the age is from 55 to 65 years. The regions are North, which is Kozhikode, and then you have Kottayam, which is South Central, and then you have Trivandrum, which is South. Data was elicited using a word list and digitally recorded. The analysis was done on Prath, and statistics I used R. ANOVA and pair, and pairwise also I had to see if there are any statistical evidences. So as mentioned earlier, duration is something we looked at, and earlier studies have also shown how duration is an important cue in distinguishing geminates and singletons. And also we can see studies where among the geminate nasals itself, duration sort of goes on a continuum where bilabial has the maximum and velar has the minimum. This is by Local and Simpson, who worked on Malayalam as well. In my study, the nasal duration, as you can see, was very highly significant in order to distinguish the singleton and the geminates, where the singleton, the alveolar, and the retroflex, as you can see in blue, is much shorter than the geminate nasals. But among the geminate nasals, we couldn't see any pattern as such as reported by Local and Simpson. Also, the preceding vowel duration was something which is measured by Local and Simpson, and sort of said that the vowels that precede geminate nasals are shorter as compared to when it precedes a singleton nasal. But looking at the vowel preceding the nasals in my study, there wasn't any significant pattern that came. And even looking at the following duration, except for very limited pairs, the geminate of bilabial and palatal, there wasn't much significance when it came to the preceding and following vowel context as cues to determine singleton and geminate nasals in terms of duration. Form and frequencies are also a cue to show the place differences, which has been seen in earlier studies. And it is reported that the second formant of the nasals, N2, is a significant cue. So that was also tested in our study. And again, N2 did not show any sort of significant pattern, except for certain pairs, as you can see, the bilabial and the singleton retroflex, as well as the palatal geminate and the singleton retroflex again, but not worth noting as compared to the other studies. But in our study, interestingly, the F2 of the preceding vowel showed certain significant patterns. And in that, we can see, if we look at these pairs, which is listed, so the alveolar dental, the alveolar bilabial, palatal dental, all these geminates, and then the alveolar retroflex singletons, we can see that the former is more front. The F2 of the former is more front, means the F2 values are high, suggesting it is fronted, which shows that there is a secondary articulation taking place, which is palatalization. And the latter, the dental bilabial retroflexes, in those pairs are more back, which sort of suggests that they are velarized. And the pattern of the alveolar and dental has been seen in the previous study, as mentioned by Khan, which who also worked on Malayalam, but only that pair. And here we can see when we sort of group these minimal pairs and look at them individually, we can see that most of the pairs have this palatalization and velarization or secondary articulation cue, which shows that this could be one reason, or could be a cue on how they maintain the distinction among the nasals. So to sum up, nasal duration is a significant factor in understanding the geminate and nasal singletons, not so much within the geminate category. And the preceding and following vowels were not significant over here, except for very specific instances. The F2 of the preceding vowel were higher for some nasals, and that could be a potential cue. But of course, these are just 12 speakers, so I would need more data, and I would want to look at more acoustic cues, which would help me in understanding how the distinction of all these rich nasal inventory is maintained in Malayalam. So that's my talk. These are my references, and thank you. If you do have any feedback or any clarification or any suggestions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine, for that wonderful and insightful presentation today. Time for questions. So Sundar has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Catherine.
Hi.
Firstly, I'm appreciative of the fact that you have very minutely and have detailed research on the fact of nasals, because generally we have the concept about varying sounds of vowels, but impact of the nasals in the Dravidian languages, that's wonderful. But still, I have one of the questions, that what's the significance of your research in real world scenario, apart from that you are adding a literature and grammar to the literature to indigenous languages? So can you please explain a little effect of the significance of your research? Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, this understanding the nasals in Malayalam is something which is very interesting for me, not only because I'm a native speaker of that language, but because, as stated earlier, among all the Dravidian languages, most of the nasals have been merged as they, as they develop. As they are spoken. But Malayalam, interestingly, it still maintains that contrast. And more than the 6 nasals, there is also an addition of another nasal, which is, again, depends on the region you're from. But yeah, so that in itself is quite interesting. And a descriptive analysis or a descriptive phonetic study on Malayalam across all these nasals haven't been done. Having said that, also, I feel with today's technology, I think it could contribute in the sense that if we have certain frequencies which we can state that now a particular nasal bilabial or the velar or of interest in dental and the alveolar, if they fall under a certain frequency, when it if it's either the F2 formants or F1 formant or F3, so if we could claim that they fall into certain categories, then that might also help in forming, a synthetic nasal inventory, which, for all these like Alexa and all sort of usages, it could help. And also, I think in general would just sort of contribute to the nasal inventory in Malayalam for starters. For that, we need a large group. So yeah, I'm planning on increasing the number of speakers. So yeah, currently it will now become 30. And so we could get a little more generalization of the nasal symbol. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been told Agua from Presentation Online 2 is ready. So if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, let's start. Okay, I want you to think about something. Have you caught yourself talking to ChatGPT and you sound a little different? I mean, you pronounce every single syllable just a bit more carefully, Actually, it's a habit that most of us have, but today we're gonna dive into exactly how a particular group of people adjust or change their speech rate, which is an acoustic feature when interacting with ChatGPT compared to human interlocutors. So as you can see here, one second. Okay, as you can see here, most of these research in this area is super English centric, except for this study, which examined one dialect, which is the African American English, and it examined the speech rate and the pitch across 3 conditions or contexts. But it is it examined that in an imaginary situations. So from that, we decided to have or to examine the speech rate within one dialect, which is called Najdi Arabic dialect, that is spoken in the capital city of Saudi Arabia. So our study looks at, okay, now our study looks at how those native speakers of Najdi Arabic change their speech rate, basically how fast or slow they speak when interacting with ChatGPT, which is an AI assistant, and to a human that they are familiar with, and to a stranger. So we really wanted to nail down two things. First, how does our speaking speed actually change when interacting to ChatGPT? And second, does our age have anything to do with it? Before we see the results, we made actually two predictions. We bet that the participants will speak slower to ChatGPT, and we also predicted that age would be an important factor in determining how fast someone talks. So let's move on to the methodology. Choosing the participants. Here we asked 20 participants. All of them are female to participate, and all of them are native speakers of Najdi Arabic. And of course, none could have any speech impairment. The whole thing here is designed to compare these two groups, teenagers and adults, just to see if age has any important role in our study. So moving on to the variables, we actually controlled for whether the participants are familiar with using such AI assistants, and we decided to exclude or not analyze any silent pauses, as well as we balance the order of the addressee the participants ask. Also, it's not about asking random questions. It's about asking like a definite question. I mean, we actually designed two types of questions. The shorter ones with exactly 8 syllables, and the longer ones with 14 or 15 syllables. So you can, here, you can literally see how the experiment is proceeded step by step, beginning or starting with the ethics, ending up with having valuable data, with the participants use unified scripts and ask 10 questions for each condition. Okay. Now the experiment is done, all voices were being recorded and analyzed. Let's move on to the interesting part, which is the results. Now, generally speaking, the speech rate averaged at 5.41, with the adults spoke slightly faster than teenagers. And across conditions, we found that the familiar human condition showed the highest rate. And finally, regarding the sentence type or the length of the sentence, we found that shorter sentences or interrogative sentences were articulated faster than the longer ones. Now, let's see if there is any interaction between these factors. First, we have condition and the sentence type. As you can see here, you will find that shorter sentences were articulated faster, regardless of the condition. And let's examine the relation with age. I mean, the relation, for example, between the sentence and age here. Let's look if the sentence type or the length of the sentence has any influence on the speech rate for both adults and teenagers. Again, the shorter sentences were spoken faster, and actually this is expected, but maybe one of you said, for example, or let's say adults spoke faster than teenager. It's true, but such a difference is not statistically significant. So it appears that age does not have any role. Again, age with relation to the condition. You will find that talking to a familiar human or a person you know is faster than talking to a stranger or an AI. And again, adults spoke faster, but such a difference is not significant. So at least here in our study, we found that the age does not appear or does not seem to change a thing. Rather, the sentence length and the person or the device you're talking to shape the speech, or let's say identify the speech rate or how fast someone talks. Now, our study do not quite agree with what previous researchers found before. first, we found that talking to familiar human is faster than unfamiliar human. Another study found exactly the opposite. And also remember how our study found no age differences. A study by Cunha and her colleagues found a clear difference between children and adults. Regardless of these differences, actually, all studies agree on that we clearly speak to any AI assistant, which is a phenomenon that is called hyperarticulation. So what is the key takeaway here? It's that we speak slower to ChatGPT or any AI assistant, and also longer sentences spoken the slowest. And for any researchers who want to investigate more, I suggest to work on other areas like pitch and tone, and to investigate different speakers from different contexts, and maybe to have different genders. I mean, to compare between females and males to see if they have the same speech rate. And before I wrap up the presentation, I'd like to thank Dr. Yahya Aldholmi for his membership with the International Society of Experimental Linguistics, and for Rima Shiri as an experimenter, and for Maya Al-Saqer for her contribution. And also, I'm deeply thankful for all the participants for their effort and time, of course, and for the College of Language Sciences at King Saud University. And yeah, thank you. And if you have any question, you're free to ask.
Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Okay, my turn. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to present here. So it's a great honor for me to share the results of my master's dissertation with you today, entitled Perception of the Dystopian in South Yorkshire. So let's start introducing some theoretical framework. So it is essential now to perceive language not only as a means of communicating information or maintaining social relationship, but also as a very important instrument for conveying social information about the speaker situation. So accordingly, the selection of one particular variable rather than another, so may show a specific social affiliation or identity. So the speaker choices of linguistic variants are not made randomly, but are conditioned by the social meaning of those variants. So indeed, attitudes and prejudices towards varieties are the result of social connotations. So the prestige associated with a specific variety will depend largely on the social attitudes to which it is related. So basically, here in Yorkshire, the Yorkshire identity in British English kind of covers all these smaller identities within Yorkshire and the features people usually link to them. Because of the different accents are so close to each other, so people from each city can usually hear those differences, but for someone from the outside, those small details might not really stand out. What really characterizes the inhabitant of Sheffield and distinguishes from the other neighboring town is a unique, interesting feature, which is significant enough to have branded Sheffielders with the nickname Dida. It refers to the realization of the fricative as a dental stop. But what is most surprising here is that the process is strongly linked to the Old English pronouns the and the, and has given rise to the nickname Dida for Sheffield people, sometimes used negatively and pejoratively by outsiders. So although the future has been talked about for years, nobody has really studied in depth. So my research is an attempt to fill that gap. So this led me to three main research questions. So first, what cover attitudes are associated with the stopping in pronouns compared to function words like these or those? Second, it is essential also to compare whether Sheffield locals and non-locals react differently to the future. And third, we want to know if attitudes differ depending on whether the future takes place in pronouns or in other type of function words. To answer these questions, I use a match guide task with splice stimuli. So basically what we do is to splice recordings using Pratt, making sure that duration and context were natural, so that the listeners heard the same sentence but with either a fricative or a dental sound. For example, these and these. So the only manipulated variable was the pronunciation of the fricative, ensuring that responses were tied to DH stopping specifically. So listeners were presented with tokens where the fricative was replaced with a dental stop. So in total, there were 40 tokens, 10 per guise, equally divided between pronouns and function words, making a total of 40. So listeners heard guises with fricative versus the dental stop, tokens inserted into passages, plus fillers items. So ratings were analyzed considering variables such as gender, origin, education, on whether listeners were from the East or West Sheffield. So people rated the different versions on social scales, like attractiveness, solidarity, or prestige. And I ran this with both Sheffield accents and received pronunciation in order to compare reactions. So given the time, I will highlight only the most important results. The findings were pretty much what we expected at the beginning, and they line up with previous research, showing that this feature is usually associated with older rural men in the area. For example, when we look at the solidarity scores on our left, for the DH stopping variant, we see that female participants generally give lower solidarity ratings for the use of the dental stop. And when we look at how people in Sheffield perceive rurality, it also changes across age groups, which again fits with those early findings. So overall, looking more in detail to our second research question, Sheffield gets the highest attractiveness ratings, especially when we hear the dental stop. Barnsley, a town within South Yorkshire, on the other hand, scored the lowest. So compared to the UK average, Chesterfield, a town located in the Midlands, South Yorkshire towns rate pronouns more positive. But here is the interesting part. When the dental stop comes in, most places actually drop in attractiveness. And this drop is really strong in Barnsley, a town located in next to Sheffield. Sheffield, although, goes the other way around. So attractiveness actually goes up there because people see the dental stop as something that really belongs to their own variety. Unexpectedly, what I found in here is that stronger reactions come at the phonetic level, not at the pronominal level. So looking at the statistical test, a t-test pair, listeners show stronger and more consistent attitudes toward the stopping in general than toward its occurrence in a specific All English pronouns. So this leads us to our discussion. So what do these results mean? So focusing on the social indexing of DH stopping, so DH stopping seems to function as a social marker influenced by age, gender, and origin. So women tend to associate with less solidarity, which might be linked to a stigmatization in formal context. All the speakers in Sheffield, however, show cover prestige, linking the future to local pride. So this shows that the future is socially meaningful and strongly connected to identity. Sheffield, in this case, values the dental stop more highly because it's formed part of the city's linguistic identity and positive self-perception. So this shows how local features gain prestige within the specific social profile of its city in South Yorkshire. The takeaway here is that this so-called DIDA phenomenon isn't just about all pronouns. It carries wider social meaning, especially when it happens in everyday function words. So that suggests some kind listeners are picking up on small phonetic details straight away and attaching social judgments to them. So overall, the stopping works as a subtle social marker in South Yorkshire, one that hasn't really been explored before, but clearly matters in how people perceive accents and identities here. So this brings us to the D phenomenon itself, named after historical use of pronouns the and the. But what we see here is that phonetic cues, such as dental stop versus fricative, seem to carry more immediate social meaning than purely pronominal variation. So this suggests, as I have said, that pronouns like the and the are not largely perceived as relic pronouns. They don't elicit strong social evaluations anymore. So in contrast, function words like this, then, that we usually used in common speech are still common in everyday speech. So variation there carries more immediate social meaning. So looking ahead, I would like to see how perception of this topic might have changed over time. So comparing historical recordings with today's data will give us a better idea of whether the stigmatization or prestige around this future is getting stronger or weaker. So I would like to thank you very much for listening. So you have any kind of question, I will be glad to answer right now. Thank you very much. Okay, no time for questions. So we shall move on to the next speaker, who is, let me check, Marie Fongaro. Okay, Marie Fongaro, he's here.
So I will present you my study on cross-linguistic influence on vowels of late Italian-French bilinguals. And first of all, I will introduce some important notions. Late bilinguals are adults who use two languages, so the mother tongue, L1, and the second language, L2, foreign language on a daily basis. And usually they started to learn the L2 after the age of 6. And in the case of bilinguals, we can observe cross-linguistic influence, which is any kind of effect that one of the speakers' languages may have on the other language. So it can be effect of L1 on the L2, but also the effect of L2 on the L1 of the speaker. And this can happen because L1 and L2 phonetic systems of bilinguals exist in a common phonetic space where the L1 and L2 sounds may interact. So the study is on late Salento Italian-French bilinguals, and I focus on the production and particularly on the L1 and L2 mid-vowels. So these bilinguals, I will just call them bilinguals in my presentation, are Italians from Salento. Salento is here, and so the south of Italy, and they moved to France. And at the time of the study, they lived in Paris, in the Paris region, and they have lived there from 1 to 33 years. And actually, they started to learn French during their middle school at the majority of the cases. So the first language is Salento Italian, which is a variety of Italian. So it's a little bit different from standard Italian. And the L2 is French. French are spoken in the central France, so different from southern French. So I will compare the production with the production of two control groups, Italians from Salento, who are living still in Salento, and French speakers born in Paris region and who are living still in Paris region. So this study is really interesting because of the differences between Salento Italian and French language. So there is no phonological difference between open mid and close mid E and between open mid and close mid O in Salento Italian, but there is in French. So for example, we have a word in Italian pesca, which means beach, and a word Italian pesca, which means fishing. In standard Italian, one pesca will be pronounced with open mid E and another with close mid E. But in Salento Italian, it will be just one vowel. So pesca and pesca, it's the same sound. I compared the F1, F2 values of these mid vowels as found in these studies. So we can see that as for F1, Salento Italian front mid vowels is in its F1 value near to the French open mid E. And Salento Italian back mid vowel is in its value near to the French open mid O. And actually for the F2, we can see that Salento Italian from mid-vowel is between the French open mid and close mid E. And the Salento Italian back mid-vowel is between open mid and close mid French O. So let's see for the hypothesis.
Sorry to interrupt, Marie. Sorry to interrupt. It seems that we can only see the title slide.
Okay, yeah, so just I will...
Sorry to interrupt, yeah.
Yeah, I will go back. So you can see only the slide, the first slide?
Yes, we can see the map now.
Like, you can see the second slide?
Yes, we can see it now. Great, thank you.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So this was third slide. I explained Salento is here, Paris is here. So they moved, the bilinguals moved from here to here, okay? And then I explained these values. So I said that the most important thing is that in Salento Italian, they have just one E and just one O. But in French, we have two E and two O. So you see. Okay, and I was on a hypothesis. Now you can see all. Yeah?
Yes, great.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So perfect, thank you. So we have four hypotheses. The first is on the influence that there will be influence of the L1 of the bilinguals on the L2. So they, because of this influence, they will pronounce the French vowels inaccurately. Okay. The second hypothesis is that the L2 experience the bilinguals have will affect the cross-linguistic influence in the production. So the more L2 experience the bilinguals have, the more accurate the production of French mid-vowels will be. And actually in this study, I examined the L2 experience of the bilinguals through three variables. So length of residence, so how many years they live in France, use of French at home, and the age of starting learning French. The third hypothesis is that there will be an influence of the L2 on the L1, so the bilinguals will differ in the production of Salento Italian mid-vowels from Italian controls because of this influence. And the last hypothesis is that the more L2 experience the bilinguals have, the less the production of Salento Italian mid-vowels will be like that of Italian controls. So we have two hypotheses on the cross-linguistic influence, the first and third, and the second and fourth about the impact of the L2 experience of the bilinguals on the amount of the cross-linguistic influence in the speech of bilinguals. For this study, I recorded the speech of 15 bilinguals. So you can see they are really different in the length of residence in France. It is from 1 year to 33 years, and they were recorded in Paris. And I recorded also the speech of Italian controls, 15. I recorded them in Italy, and in Lecce, which is a city in Salento, and 15 French controls. I recorded them in Paris. And actually, they had to fill a questionnaire for collecting data about the language use and language background. And then they had to complete a speech production task. So the bilinguals did it in L1 and L2, and the controls did it only in L1, of course. In the first phase, we have a picture, and they have to produce it in the carry sentence I say X. And in the second phase, there are more pictures on the screen, and I move these pictures, and they had to describe what I am moving. So by the sentence, I put X next to Y, I moved X. So in the end, we had these target vowels in this target word, and each word was produced 4 times by a speaker. So the acoustic analysis were did in Pratt with transcription, segmentation, and labeling of the recordings, and automatic measuring of the formats. And the statistical analysis I did in I for testing the hypothesis 1 and 3 on cross-linguistic influence. I built a set of linear mixed effect models. And for testing the hypothesis 2 and 4 about the L2 experience impact, I built a set of multiple linear regressions with 3 independent variables, I already said. So it's length of residence in France, use of French at home by the bilinguals, and the onset of the L2 acquisition. And actually, for the results, so we had a significant difference between the bilinguals L2 production and that of French controls, as for F1 of open mid and close mid A and close mid O, and F2 of both French O. So this means that the bilinguals didn't produce these vowels correctly. I would say lack French controls, meaning incomplete L2 acquisition by the bilinguals in these vowels. And there was no significant difference between the bilinguals L2 production and that of Italian controls. So there is no influence of the bilinguals L2 on the L1. And for the hypothesis 2 and 4, we found that any of the 3 variables does not significantly predict the amount of the cross-linguistic influence in the production of the speech of bilinguals. So here we have the figure. So you can see we have the bilinguals here. And for the L1 Italian, they are really identical to the Italian controls. So we cannot observe any effect of the L2 on the L1. But for the French L2, you can see they do not produce French vowels identically as French controls. So meaning that there is still something to perfect in the L2 pronunciation of French vowels. Actually just discuss these results. So the first hypothesis was almost entirely confirmed because we found the influence of the L1 of the bilinguals on the L2 mid vowels. And this result is in line with the speech learning supposition because it says that when a speaker just meet L2 sound, it classified it into L1 category whether possible, and it is leading to not completely correct pronunciation of the L2 sounds. And for the hypothesis 3, it is not confirmed because there was no L2 influence on L1 of the bilinguals. And actually, I think that this is because we have bilinguals with very different and various L2 experience in this study. So maybe if we include only the bilinguals who are living in France for many years, maybe we can also observe the influence of the L2 on the L1. Concerning the hypothesis 2 and 4, it was not confirmed because the L2 experience of the bilinguals is not linked directly to the amount of the cross-linguistic influence in their speech. And actually, I would explain this result by the speech learning model, and it's a revised version where the model says that we have a lot of factors that can together influence the L2 accuracy of the speaker. So maybe more variables have to be looked together and evaluated, but it's just still the question how to do it methodologically. In conclusion, we saw that there is an influence of the L1 on the L2 mid-vowels for the bilinguals, but there is not influence of the L2 on the L1 mid-vowels. And this study should be deepened by analyzing inter-speaker variability, because we had really heterogeneous speakers in terms of the L2 experience. I thank you for your attention. I hope you can hear me still. And if you have any question, just tell me.
So we welcome our next presenter, Manishu. Online presentation number 7. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming to my talk. I manage you, and those are my topics. So, okay, how to do this? Okay. The goal of this study was to investigate cross-linguistic variation in the perception of final release stop by native speakers, and those final stops were spoken by Taiwan Southern Min. So we are going to examine whether the native speakers of Taiwan Southern Min, English, Dutch, Polish, and French, whether they can perceive them well. Those are our participants. We had 96 participants, and you can see from the table that for the Dutch, to try to describe the characteristics of the final stops. For example, for the Dutch, they allow release final stops only. So does the Polish and the French. And to Taiwan Southern Min, we allow only a release stop. And for English speakers, they allow both release or unreleased. And the third column indicates that they are typological. Those are more details about our participants. As you can see that most of the 4 out of 5 language backgrounds, they consider their mother tongue as Dutch, English, French, and Polish. But to those Taiwan Southern Min speakers, some of them consider their first language, their mother tongue, as Mandarin Chinese. As you can tell from the language they spoke with their family, language spoke with their friends. So we can consider those Taiwan Southern Min speakers as bilingual of Mandarin Chinese and the Taiwan Southern Min, and try to keep in mind that Mandarin Chinese doesn't allow any final stop. So those are our materials. The words were recorded by a male native speaker of Taiwan Southern Min from Tainan. And we vary the 6 different onsets, PTK and BTK, 3 vowels, ERU, 4 coda, PTK, and glottal stop. So we got 48 actual words in Taiwan Southern Min as our stimuli. Then we manipulate the tones, so that would be the high and the low. Then we got twice of 48. In the end, because we get it backward in 25 milliseconds intervals, that means 0 millisecond, minus 25, 50, and 75 milliseconds. We got a total of 384 stimuli. So here comes our procedures. Our participants need to identify which stop coda they heard about those 4, PTK and the glottal stop. We used generalized linear mix effects to analyze this data. And we took the vowel, coda, onset, tone, and whether the onset is aspirated or not, language background, and gate as the fixed effects, and informants our participants, and the word items as the random effects. Here comes our results. As you can tell, we took the vowel R as our reference. So you can see that there were significant differences between ER and ERU. So they are different. As we took the coda K as our reference. So there was a differences between coda P and coda K. And as for the gate experiments, we took the gate 0 millisecond as our reference. So you can see that the gate 50 and 75, were significant difference from gate 25 and 0. The focus of our study was the language backgrounds. So we took the Dutch as our reference, and you can see that the Polish and the Taiwan Southern speakers behave significant different from Dutch, and they because they estimated, so they got a lower performance. So the question raised here is why Taiwan Southern here comes the correct rate by coda and the vowel in different L1. As you can see that the Dutch, English, French, overall, they had higher accuracy, and as compared to the Polish and Taiwan Southern they had a rapid lower accuracy. So the question raised here is why Taiwan Southern they try to perceive their mother tongue. How come they cannot perceive it? So the lower performance of Taiwan Southern speakers can be attributed to the typological constraints of scenic languages, which strictly segment syllables into onset and rise. And because of that, we hardly utilize whole coda for phonemic contrast. This structure tendency traceable back to the phonological traditions dating back to Tang Dynasty dictionaries. This suggests that native speakers treat the rhymes as the primary perception unit. Consequently, the task of distinguishing between non-functional coda categories pose significant challenge for those speakers. So I think we try to argue there's onset rise differences to our Taiwan Southern speakers instead of the consonants, vowel, and the coda, onset consonants and coda. How about our Polish speakers? We try to say that because the Schwartz and his colleagues in 2014 they claim that in English, the CV transitions are perceived as integral to the phonological structure and are assigned high perceptual weight. In contrast, in Polish, the CV transitions are treated as peripheral acoustic features, with burst cues serving as the primary information for identifying consonant place of articulation. So probably because of that, the Polish native speakers exhibit similarly low accuracy as Taiwan Southern speakers in the identification of final unreleased stops. This finding, our finding, supports the hypothesis of Schwartz and his colleagues that Polish listeners rely on burst information to determine the place of articulation of final stop instead of the transition. I think that's give some explanation why that's the case. That's one. So how do we explain the other three different groups? For Dutch, they allows release final stops, and so does the French one. They allows release stops only. So according to Penn model, we think we can argue that because they belong to the category goodness, as you can see from the table. As for English, because they allow both a release and a release final stops, so we think we can put English speakers as the English listeners as the two categories. And we mentioned about the Polish because the transition are treated as peripheral acoustic features, and Taiwan Southern because native speakers treat the rhyme as the primary perception units. So that's the reason they behave differently. So here comes our conclusion. The present study examined the perception of final and release stops across 5 different language backgrounds, Taiwan Southern English, Dutch, Polish, and French, using gated auditory stimuli. For Taiwan Southern speakers, strict syllable structure constraints and limited releasing on F2 cues for coda perception results in the lowest accuracy. For Polish listeners, they also exhibit lower accuracy, consistent with prior study that they rely primarily on burst cues, which were absent in the stimuli. For English, Dutch, and French listeners, it's likely that they benefited from robust transition, formal transition. Thank you very much.
Okay, shall we move on to the next speaker?
Thank you.
I guess we have three speakers right now. Our online presentation aids comparison of English and Cantonese intonation by Luke, Hu Chin, Chan, Jin, Ki, and Zhong Qiu. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, good
Can I
afternoon.
start?
I'm Chen Yin Coco.
I'm Jern Natalie.
I'm Lokyu Cheng Anna.
Our topic is comparison of English and Cantonese supersegmentals. We will focusing on tone and intonation. This is the table of contents for our presentation. First, I will talk about what tone and intonation are. Then I will introduce the Cantonese tones. Next, Natalie will discuss Cantonese intonation. After that, I will present and explain our primary research. Finally, Anna will compare the intonation of Hong Kong English speakers and English native speakers. Next page, please. Okay, let's begin by distinguishing between tone and intonation. Tone operates at the syllable level and is crucial in tonal languages like Cantonese and Putonghua. In Cantonese, changing the pitch pattern of a syllable, whether it's high or low, can completely change the meaning of the word. English is non-tonal language. Moving on to intonation, it functions at the utterance level. It refers to the pattern of pitch and melody that cross entire sentences rather than individual syllables. Intonation serves several key functions. It signals grammatical structure, acting as the spoken equivalent of punctuation. Intonation also conveys personal attitudes and emotions. For example, let's go outside. Let's go outside. Intonation can be categorized into several types. First, Anna, please turn to the next page. Following intonation can be used for statements. For statements, commands, WH question tests that don't need an answer. Next, rising intonation can be used for yes-no question, polite requests, question tests that require an answer, and WH question to request clarification, repetition, or express shock. Then, rising falling intonation can be used for choices, making lists, conditional structures. After that, falling and rising intonation can be used for uncertain answer or don't want to answer. Okay, finally, continuation rise. It is two or more intonational phrases within an utterance. First one ends in a small rise. It means speaker has not yet completed the utterance, showing there is more to come. For example, when we came in, we had dinner. Okay, now let's dive into Cantonese tones. Cantonese has 6 tones. It is a tonal language. The pitch patterns applied to syllables can change the meaning of words. Look at the graph. C, 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 C. The tone used on the syllable C can make it mean poem, try, time, and so on. It is depending on the pitch. Okay, now Natalie will discuss Cantonese intonation.
Okay, thank you, Coco. So now let's define it first. So intonation, it is a speech melody uses pitch to convey meaning at the utterance level rather than the word level. Paralinguistic factors such as attitudinal states also significantly impact intonation, as speakers have different emotional states and listeners are sensitive to the mood they convey. In Cantonese, for example, an angry emotion is expressed in a loud voice with higher pitch and shorter duration, while a calm speaker can express it in a deep, cracky voice. The variation in tone of voice signaling a particular attitudinal state for paralinguistic communication is relatively unsystematic. In actual speech in a tone language, the two systems of pitch fluctuation, tone and intonation, occur simultaneously, as no one can speak without intonation or dispense with the lexical tones. The output of the co-occurrence of tone and intonation can be complex, as losing lexical tones can lead to the loss of utterance meanings, and distorted intonation can result in the loss of utterance meanings. In Cantonese, intonation is superimposed on tone, unlike non-tone languages like English that change pitch movements of stressed syllables. This indicates that intonation manipulation in Cantonese cannot be expected to be the same as in non-tone language. So let's look at some examples here. For rising intonation, the first example is Al-Saqer. In Cantonese, a rising intonation at the end of a sentence typically signals a yes-no question, even though the word order doesn't change from the statement form. The rising pitch turns the statement "you know him or her" into "do you know him or her?" This intonation pattern is very common for forming questions in spoken Cantonese. Second example is "Beoa." Here, the rising intonation softens the sentence, turning what could be a command into a polite request. "Beoa" by itself is a direct instruction like "give it to me," but by adding "r" and raising the intonation, it sounds more like "could you give it to me?" or "would you mind giving it to me?" The third example is "Lisek The rising intonation here turns the sentence into a yes-no question too. Even though the word order is the same as the statement, the pitch at the end signals a question, which in Cantonese is commonly used for checking on someone or as a greeting. For flat or neutral intonation, the example is "Haime." With this intonation, "Haime" is just an acknowledgement, similar to "Oh, is that so?" without much emotion. If you were surprised, you would use a rising intonation, but here it is just simply recognizing new information without reacting strongly. For falling intonation, the example is "Beihela." A falling constant intonation at the end of the sentence indicates a command or strong suggestion. This is telling or urging someone to go, rather than asking if they will go. Another important element of intonation is sentence final particle. It can also change the meaning of sentences by adding them like me, la, lo. So look at the example here. Uma gam ziu fan so zao. By adding the sentence final particle, it changes all the meaning, like Uma gam ziu fan so zao me, Uma gam ziu fan so zao la, Uma gam ziu fan so zao lo. So, changing intonation and adding sentence final particle can completely change the meaning or mood of a sentence, even if the verbs stay the same. So now let's pass to Coco to talk more about on our primary research.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, in our research, we aimed to analyze the differences in intonation between native English speakers and Hong Kong English speakers. We collect data through audio recordings and video clips, capturing native English speakers and Hong Kongers reading selected English sentences. In Analyze, first, we used speech and analyze software Pratt to examine the intonation patterns in the recordings. Next, we compared Cantonese speakers' recordings and English native speakers from the movie clips. Here are the questions we used in the survey. For the results, we received 11 responses from Hong Kongers who identified Cantonese as their mother tongue. The analysis revealed interesting patterns in how they use intonation compared to native English speakers. Now I will hand over to Anna, who will talk about the comparison.
As we mentioned before, Cantonese use a range of sentence final particles to convey the discoursive meanings. According to Mock 2016, the intonation system works very differently in the first language, which is Cantonese, of Hong Kong English speakers. And we'll look into the differences. We selected several responses in the survey to compare with English native speakers so that you can hear the differences between them. The yellow arrow symbol here also shows how the tones are going.
Where did you find that?
You can hear that English native speakers obviously using following intonation.
Where did you find that?
And Hong Kong English speakers is using rising intonation in WH questions. For the yes/no questions, do you like it? English native speakers use rising intonation.
Do you like it?
And Hong Kong English speakers use level intonation.
Do you like it?
Next, English native speakers is using rising falling intonation in the sentence.
If we can get through this, we can get through anything.
And Hong Kong English speakers is using falling intonation.
If we can get through this, we can get through anything.
For the either/or questions,
Should we stop? We'll keep going.
we can hear that English native speakers is using rising falling intonation, and
Should we stop or keep going?
Hong Kong English speakers is using falling rising intonation. English native speakers also use rising falling intonation in listing.
Yogurt, coffee, orange juice, and toast.
And Hong Kong English speakers is using falling rising intonation as well.
Yogurt, coffee, orange juice, or toast.
In the sentence, I don't remember, English native speakers is using fall rise intonation.
I don't remember.
And Hong Kong English speakers use falling intonation.
I don't remember.
According to Sundar 2010, they found the use frequency of English intonation in Hong Kong English. You can see that Hong Kong English speakers tend to use level intonation the most, while British English speakers use full intonation. And both Hong Kong English and British English seldom use rise-fall intonation. Similarly, not many people use rise-fall intonation in our survey as well. First, it is because the Hong Kong English speakers is not fully understand the English intonation patterns. Cantonese speakers have weaker command of English intonation because of the lack of similar forms in their native language. The second reason is the excessive and irregular pitch variation. Cantonese speakers' English intonation often shows pitch movements on the last one or two syllables, similar to Cantonese tone patterns, which is different from the native English intonation, making the speech sound less natural. Moreover, the tone influence on intonation use. Cantonese, as a tonal language, uses pitch to distinguish lexical meaning, which transfers into English intonation, affecting natural use. Last but not least, it is because of the differences in expressing sentence mood. Cantonese speakers sometimes struggle to use English intonation appropriately to understand the sentence types like questions and statements. This is our reference list, and thank you for your listening.
Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. So shall we move on to the next presenter, who is Jackie here, with evaluation of L2 English accented speakers employability in China. Okay.
So hi everyone, I'm Yu Qing. I'm a postgraduate student at the Australian National University. Today I will be presenting my study supervised by Dr. Ksenia Ganesheva. Okay, so in the Chinese employment context, about 80% of recruiters report that both oral and written English skills are evaluated during interviews. Although an accent itself is not a deciding factor when assessing people's English proficiency, it has been found to be a key factor that can indirectly influence how a candidate is perceived. In L1 English-speaking countries, the general impression for foreign accented speakers is negative. They were also considered to be more suitable for lower status or non-customer-facing jobs. But this does not mean that all the foreign accent speakers, they are rated equally. So for instance, in the US, a study found that the Colombian accent speakers, they were rated as more employable than French accent speakers. Apart from the speaker accent, certain social factors can also influence the employability ratings, such as speaker gender. So in the US, people found that there was an increased bias against female speakers with foreign accents, while in Norway, female speakers with standard British accents receive higher scores than male speakers of the same background. So these findings might suggest that the effect of speaker gender might be different depending on specific accents. There are two main theoretical mechanisms to explain the relative ranking of accents here. One focuses on processing fluency. So people found that when someone speaks with a less standard accent or non-standard accent, it often takes more cognitive effort and longer processing time to understand what they are saying. So these extra efforts can lead to negative impressions. And the second explanation relies on listeners' prejudice or stereotyping. So listeners first might use accent as a signal to guess the speaker's social group and then to activate their stereotypical views of that specific social group. So based on current findings, although bias against different foreign accents have been widely reported in L1 English-speaking countries, limited studies have been conducted in China. So we don't know whether Chinese recruiters would have preference for specific accents, which could definitely create unfair hiring practices. So our study contributes to this gap by exploring how do L1 Chinese listeners evaluate the employability of L2 English accents. And here we specifically focus on unconscious reactions to different accents in order to address the social desirability bias that can emerge from exploring explicit language attitude. And we also explored the effect of speaker gender on the employability evaluations in our study. So to answer that research question, we design and carry out a perception experiment online via the Qualtrics platform. And in total, 90 listeners participated in this study, and they were all L1 Mandarin Chinese speakers, at least 18, and living in China. And for our speakers, so there are 2 male and 2 female speakers between 25 to 35 years old, representing each of the 3 English accents, including Mandarin, Korean, and German. So listeners from these language backgrounds was chosen based on Chinese familiarity and the likelihood of encountering these language varieties in their workplace and their daily life as well. And for the stimuli, so there are 12 clips extracted from the Speech Accent Archive. It is an open access database that provides more than 3,000 English speech samples. And in the archive, each speaker reads a standardized paragraph called Please Call Stella in English. In our study, the first half of the recording was selected because it seems sufficient for listeners to form impression of an accent within 10 to 15 seconds based on previous research. In the experiment, listeners were asked to evaluate the employability of speakers on a 5-point Likert scale after listening to each clip. And here we use 5 questions to measure the employability. So on the right-hand side, you can see there's a screenshot of the specific wording of each question, and they were all written in Chinese. So the questions are the candidate's suitability in a foreign invested enterprise, the overall satisfaction with the candidate's performance, whether this candidate would be recommended for hiring, the likelihood of this candidate to be a manager, and lastly would be the desire to work with this candidate. So for these 5 questions, we found that they were highly correlated. Then we followed the previous research to collapse them into one employability score to show a general impression there. And after doing this correlation test, the effect of accent and speaker gender was analyzed using linear max effect model in R. So here are some results we have. So on the left-hand side would be a summary of our findings. So in general, the German accented speakers, they were rated as significantly more employable than Korean accented speakers, but no significant differences were found between Mandarin accented speakers and the other 2 groups, and no effect of speaker gender was observed in our study. Our first finding is that the German accented speakers, they were rated as more employable than Korean accented speakers. So this finding is quite similar to previous research showing an hierarchical relationship among the L2 accent groups. There are 2 possible explanations here. One potential reason might be the relevant to the similarities in the phonetic inventory between German and English that allows German accented English to be perceived as more comprehensible than Korean accented English. Or listeners might exhibit a negative bias against Asian speakers, but the data in our study was not sufficient to say whether this pattern was driven by comprehensibility or listener stereotyping. So we would say that's something for future research. And our second finding is that Mandarin accented speakers, they were not rated as more employable than the other 2 L2 English groups. So this finding is quite different from previous research showing an in-group preference. Since both listeners and speakers, they share the same L1, then we will, which could enable Mandarin accent to be more comprehensible to our listeners. So that our listeners might give higher ratings to those Mandarin accented speakers, but that was not the case in our study. So we will conclude that this rating pattern was influenced by pre-existing stereotyping rather than comprehensibility. Our last finding is that there is a lack of an interaction between speaker gender and accent evaluation. So this pattern might indicate a trend toward greater gender equality, particularly in foreign and Western enterprise. But this perspective might be a bit optimistic, we will say. So further research can be done in this area in more employment contexts. So to wrap up, all these findings might demonstrate the potential for accent-based discrimination in the Chinese employment context, which might provide a foundation for recruiters to be aware of or to kind of reduce their bias in their future decision making. So finally, I'd like to acknowledge our listeners, reviewers of this conference, examiners of my thesis, participants of the variation group at ANU, and my research sisters for their feedback and their support in this project. So here are some references I used for this slide. So I think that's all from me today. Thank you for your listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Finally, we have Sundar, that will be our next presenter.
Okay, thank you. So today I'm here to present my topic, phonemic shift in Punjabi Pakistani language. So I can start up with the abstract that language plays an important role in developing thoughts and culture of an individual, as stated by Worf in 1956. And the individual's identity is the product of reality constructed by language. In the era of globalization, cross-cultural variation has though increased, and for that particular purpose, the language shift economy has led to the immigrant identity that has resulted into the psychologically restrained identities. So what the aim of my paper is to unveil the patterns of language shift resulting in phonemic shift in Pakistani society, especially the Punjabi language, that is Indo-Aryan language. And what the major focus was that particularly from mother language to foreign language, that is Pakistani Punjabi to British English, that how the individuals from Pakistani region have migrated to British English, and then they had the conflict of their identities, because language is one of the form of the identity of a language. So this paper is also impinged upon the risk of endangerment of language and cultural heritage, and it presupposes the risk of exclusive identities. And the disturbed identities in particular have been taken as a sample for the study. So starting off the introduction, the language is of course the way through which individuals all around the world communicate. They convey their ideas and emotions and desires. And Gramsci states that language system represents the psychological and cultural item of an individual. One word from the language usually gets borrowed and the other words gets changed, as has been stated by Kesamawa and Lee in 2019. And language shift has been called as the cause of language death too, because of the case of colonization especially. And Pakistan is especially the product of colonization, and the languages have died onto the superiority of new languages. And the individuals do not find the situation to speak their own vernacular because of some superiority complex or inferiority complex owing to the colonization, as explained by Morpho and in 2020. So proceeding to the claims already discussed, Nawaz et al. In 2024 claimed that inferiority complex owing to colonization, social privilege condition imposed by the colonizers, master and slave relation between the colonizers and the colonized pose the threats to local languages. And in case of Punjabi, the distinct L and sounds of Punjabi have been found out to be the cause of shift of mother language from Punjabi to Urdu. And it was identified by Arslan et al. In 2025. So it's not only the colonized language, but also the product of the new language after the colonization, that was Urdu, that has shifted the migration effect of the particular indigenous language, that is Punjabi language, among Pakistani individuals. And now the new Z generation we have seen the major transcendent state of language from the indigenous form to the other form, and the identity has been the major flux among the individuals. So we also find that assimilation, apanthesis, deletion, metathesis as the major process responsible for phonological change in a language. And apart from these borrowing and the influx of the prestigious language that creates the inferiority among the social order of prestige within the language has concerned major concern of spoken language by the individuals for economic, social, and cultural reasons, causing them to be averting from their mother language. So the major framework that I had used for this study was verticalization model of language shift, and it has been considered as the major contributing factor to language and identity loss. The loss of local control on local institutions and their interconnectedness causes a shift in the structure of community. The change in community structure ultimately delivers a notion of alienated culture, transforming the language identity of a specific area. Coming to my research objectives that totally align with the research questions. So my first objective was to find out the language shift from Punjabi to English at phonemic level. Number two, it was to find out the phonological variance in Punjabi language owing to prevalent English language. And number three was to find out language shift at phoneme level as the cause of exclusive identity among Pakistani Z generation. So Going on to the methodology section. So this research was a mixed method research paradigm, and the individuals taken, or the sample taken for the study, involved 6 participants divided into 2 groups. One group belonged to Punjab, although the data was a participant, the sample was too small, but it was one of the limitations of the studies too. But it created a pavement for a better research approach. So one group belonged to Punjab, Pakistan, and the other group belonged to Canada, America. Both the groups had their birthplace in Punjab. The early childhood of both the group was spent in Punjab, Pakistan, and their mother tongue was Punjabi. So open-ended interview was conducted to search out the phonological differences. And it was seen that what a verticalization model of language shift search out the shift patterns. It has been searched that individuals, after being interviewed, were asked to read out the literary text of English and Punjabi. In order to analyze their understanding of the text, they were asked to summarize the read text. The phonological and psychological shift was analyzed, instrumenting a use constant and transcription chart respectively. And that chart was adjusted to a Punjabi transcription chart. So what a verticalization model of language shift says, it says that language shift has been found out to be the cause of economic practices, and Brown suggests that verticalization model at language level to be the product of agencies particularly and industries controlling the community. Crucially, verticalization rests on a clear testable claim. If communities give up horizontal pattern in favor of vertical ones, shift follows. So we will come to know that what were the horizontal patterns and what were the vertical patterns in case of this particular case study that has caused a migrant identity shift in the particular language, and what were those specific sounds that were shifted and that were observed. So that we all know, this is a phonemic chart of voiced and unvoiced consonants and vowels. So a result, they have been depicted in the realization of Punjabi phonemes that have a parallel intonation to English phonemes, and they have been transcribed to the into Roman English for easiness. So first of the pronunciation patterns of the individual that they were allowed to speak were "मैं college the student wa te menu painting the shok wa." So what he meant to say that I am a student of a college and I have keen interest in painting. In Punjabi, this pronunciation follows like मैं college the student हाँ ते मैनू painting the शौक है. So what was the major difference? The major difference was in understanding the two pronunciation patterns, because the individual pronounced it as wa, but in English it is majorly as da or a, and in Punjabi parallel it is a. And the other thing that was of major interest, that not only the vowel was seen as a shift in the language phonemic level, but we have also seen that there was a shift in the consonant level. For example, there is an example given ahead, which I'll translate it as "मैं क्या company with job करना चाहनी हूँ." In Punjabi, it is literally read as "मैं tech company with job करना चाहनी हाँ." So the h sound and the nasal n sound have been changed to n particular sound, and then there is, again, I have taken just few of the examples from these, and the third example that I have transcribed it here, that is "Kai achhi cheezan," means many good things, but in Punjabi it is spoken as "Kai achhi cheezan." In English, I sound is pronounced as I. In Punjabi, it is transcribed into a, like "Kai achhi cheezan." So they were unable to pronounce it exactly into the Punjabi transcription factors. So going directly to the analysis and the discussion section, Uh, we had found that S sound has shifted to the H sound. Although the H sound is present in both the languages and S sound is also present in both the languages, but the shift is following from vowel to consonant shifting. Another major thing was that S sound has changed to A sound. And the in sound, especially that is translated into Punjabi language, the noon gunna sound, sound that was seen to be changed into nun sound. That is again a nasalized sound. And then the retroflex sound, ro sound, was missing out to the connected speech effect in English language. Like when they said the computer student, they didn't say like computer student, rather they said it like computer student. And then other thing was diphthong I is also present in English, and that has affected Punjabi phonemic institute of oi into I. And then there was again a difference between hai and a, because in English we have not such type of her sound, rather we have sound, although, but in Punjabi we have a sound, so there is the difference of the vowel and the consonant struggles, and they were more into the her sound that describes that they had the effect of English phonemes, rather than they were unable to produce a sound. And we also found out that most of the vowel sounds were mixed. They were not fixed out. Rather, they got it intricated into their own origin of being the binary effect or binary individual of Punjab, Pakistan, and Canada, America. So conclusion come up with that the horizontal spaces connect the identity through language. And what are the horizontal spaces? The same space, the same culture, the same country, and moreover the same cultural influx. So the second part was, as the verticalization of model of language shift states, that vertical agencies, however, in the case of Pakistani Punjabi language, have rendered a shift to major vowel sounds in Pakistani Punjabi. And what vertical agencies were there? Number one, as stated earlier, that there was the colonization effect. That colonization effect has affected the identity of individual of English as a major dilemma of the individuals, that English is the superior language. So major trend was seen that people who were Punjabi, they do not own their own language to the next generation, rather they predicted themselves to the basic concept of English language, and they haven't made effort to make their individuals learn that language, so that one of the parental thought or the parenting or the mother tongue became the vertical agencies for a language shift. And then other agencies involve the schooling pattern, the institutions, and the political system also. So the shift is causing a loss in language syllables to causing a shift of identity, and identity being the agency of language is rendering the cross-cultural people a mixed identity cause. So what it put forward, so what is the significance and what are the solutions to such a loss? So the need of the hour is to go for the dimensions of culture, which he calls world Englishes. And then there is more product towards language documentation and propagation that might reveal the real incubation of language identities. That's all from my side, and hopefully that was quite interacting with you people. And just now open for the question answer sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sundar, for the presentation. Okay, it's time for our closing session.
Yes, maybe invite Dr. Wiens Lai, the chair of the committee of this conference, to say a few words to us, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mimi, and thank you, every one of you. As we bring Phonetics 2025 Hong Kong to a close, let us take a moment to reflect on the vibrant exchange of ideas that has unfolded over these past few days. From the inspiring keynote lectures by Professors Yisu, Professor Janet Fletcher, and Professor Neil Schiller, to the diverse presentations on accent, prosody, intonation, and computation of phonetics, this conference has truly showcased the depth and dynamism of our field. Whether you join us in person at the West Kowloon campus or participated online from across the globe, your presence has helped shape a collaborative and forward-looking dialogue. We've explored how phonetics intersects with technology, education, and society, and how it continues to evolve in response to new challenges and innovations. On behalf of the organizing committee, thank you for your contributions, your curiosity, and your commitment to advancing phonetic research. We look forward to continuing this journey together and to welcoming you again at future gatherings of the International Linguistic Society. Safe travels for those who are in Hong Kong. Now back to your country and keep the conversation going. Thank you very much. I will now pass the time to Professor Antonis Martinez. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you. Well, as everything in life, we have come to the end of this conference, which hopefully will be the beginning of a lot more things. And especially Hong Kong, which is an attractive place. And I would very, very much like to be there. But unfortunately, a heavy workload and all this, it hasn't been able for me to be there this time. Well, to start with, I must thank everybody here. First of all, the participants. Without them, there is no conference. The local university and the authorities in Hong Kong. Of course, Vince Lai, the chair of the conference, has made a tremendous job. And the organizing committee, they have been impressive. Well, they invited the keynote speakers. They were just excellent. Amazing. Well, if I come to the Linguistic Society, Katie, our administrator, did a lot of job from the very conception, from the very beginning until now, all the way. She has done everything. Well, now let's talk about the future, which is the most important. This year, we are the International Linguistic Society, which is Linguistic Society. It used to be X-Ling Society, that is Experimental Linguistic Society. We thought we would broaden the scope and include all possible linguistic subjects. Possible is a relative term. And we will have a couple of big conferences, Linguistic Society conferences, and then smaller thematic, as we call them, conferences. The one has been this conference on phonetics in Hong Kong. We will have more activities. Just to mention one, we shall set up an international system of collaborators, younger researchers, to coordinate the scientific aspects of the language. We would like to develop collaborations. Our people the society, the members, to develop collaborators, and all this can go through our website, where we will have multiple connection channels where people can communicate with each other. Now, we have concluded phonetics. We have a lot of job ahead, which is we will upload videos and photos for us to remember. Then we have the proceedings, the volume, and when we are concluded with this, we are already in another job. We have in February the pronunciation conference. Well, pronunciation, why this? It could be part of phonetics, but we have separated it. Why? It has always been in my mind, especially during the last year, and I could even mention Paris last year. Sometimes I could not understand. I had a hard time to understand if people were speaking to me in English or in French. And it took some moments, some minutes, some seconds to understand what it was, so that I adjusted myself, which means a lot of people do not pronounce, do not articulate clearly enough to facilitate communication. And the case is much worse when we speak a foreign language or a dialect or whatever. Sometimes we don't understand so well dialects even in our language. Why? Dialect is one aspect. The other one is articulation and pronunciation. Why? Because we never paid attention. In schools, when we're at schools as children, what do we learn? To read. It is important to read, to learn how to read. Nobody told us that we would speak clearly. And there are a lot of misconceptions and what, especially in foreign languages. On the other hand, well, a few months ago, I was in Sweden, and now I have started observing those things. And I said to a couple of girls, different girls, a doctor I remember, and she was so happy on the telephone. I didn't know her, but she was speaking so excellently. I mean, I was so happy to hear her. And I told her, you speak amazingly. And she was happy. I mean to say, among other things, communication in the first place, verbal communication, pronunciation is very important because it's one's style, one's personality, and a lot of specific attributes we have. So I think pronunciation is important both for science, but for many other aspects as well. So that is why we have pronunciation as a thematic conference, and it is quite soon, and I would be very, very happy to see you there. It's open now. We accept submissions, and we will soon meet again. I mean, even if you don't have the time or you can't submit, we will always be open, and we can meet online like here. And so we will continue to see each other and meet each other. Thank you again, everybody, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.